Yes, that way. Was that ever pursued?
Yes, I actually talked to her a couple times. Lakeisha, I actually was talking to her a couple years ago. Everything was seeming great, we was communicating, and then the communication just stopped. I don't.
I think it's the girl like Tasha K. She got a Jay-Z son on there.
Oh, his alleged son?
No. You talk to him personally? That's his son.
You think that's his son?
Yeah. You know what I think his son? First of all, Jay-Z offered him money. At first he offered him bread, like, and everything, but his aunt, this is like his caretaker didn't like approve of it. She said no. Jay-Z got a lien on her house, all type of shit that was going on. Yeah, the lady put up paperwork and everything with his name on it and all that. I mean, but young boy's so thorough though. He just want a dad. He not trying to get no money. He not trying to do none of that. I mean, that's why. So I told him when he called me 2 years ago, I said, listen, I don't want to be the one to tell your story because they're gonna think I'm trying to catch rep off of it. So let me let you tell your story somewhere else first. I mean, then I could talk about it. But he called me like 2 years ago, telling me like, I said, oh, young boy. He's like, I just want a dad. I don't want no money. I'm already 18. I think he was like 20 something at the time. But something happened to him, and I was like, yo, that sounds kind of weird. He said he was coming out from work, going to work, and it was a gun in his car. Like when he opened the door, he seen the gun. He said he went to go like. Call his man like, yo, did you leave a gun in my car? His man's like, no. He said, why you on the phone talking to his man? The cops pull up and lock him up. He said, he's telling the cops, no, that's not my gun. He's like, so he went in the building he was in and they seen that somebody pulled up and put the guns in his car.
Oh.
And pulled off. I said, bro, I don't know nobody in the hood that got guns to just waste like that to do that. I don't know what. He's like, yeah, so like Jay-Z had a gag order against him, like trying to get a gag order and trying to. If my thing is, if this is not my son, I'll just take a test.
They couldn't get pregnant. Not naturally, not normally. What I do know is this. When Beyonce got on that stage with that fake baby bump.
Oh, yeah.
It was lined up with the same timing of where Kathy White would have been in her second trimester. And when we all watched her get on TV with that fake pregnancy belly that folded over.
Yep.
She sat down. The timeline of when she delivered Blue Ivy lines up almost perfect with the timeline of when Kathy White would have delivered.
Wow.
We all know that Blue Ivy came from a surrogate.
Yep.
They shut that hospital down like a president had just been. And parents who had just had children themselves weren't even allowed to see their own kids for 24 hours.
They bounced my family off the 6th floor and from the waiting room and made them go downstairs and get her.
There's a lot of us that are coming together to deal with this issue. This is not by any means just us.
Because of the security that was locking that whole thing down.
$1.3 million is alleged that Beyonce and Jay-Z, the Carters, paid this hospital to have the right to have their baby there in complete secrecy and privacy.
Okay, so the surrogate was carried out and no one heard her speak a word.
Do we know if the surrogate was alive?
They typically turned some of the cameras off so that there was no pictures.
For years, a single story has chased Jay-Z, a paternity claim that refuses to fade. What began as internet chatter evolved into filings, hearings, and headlines, an opaque legal maze where one side says, I just want answers, and the other keeps it strictly silent. Now the question returns with new intensity. Will there ever be a definitive test, or just more motion without resolution? At the center is Ramir Satterthwaite, who has long alleged Jay-Z is his biological father. He said the goal isn't money or fame, just clarity. Over the years, petitions and complaints have tried to force the issue of DNA testing in different courts. Some attempts stalled on procedural grounds, things like jurisdiction and filing rules. Others were dismissed. Through it all, Jay-Z has not publicly confirmed the allegation. In music, he's waved at the topic with denials. Think the Billie Jean, "the kid ain't mine" line. But beyond lyrics, the official stance has been no comment. Behind the scenes, supporters of Ramir say the system itself became an opponent. Missed filings, wrong venues, motions kicked for technical reasons. Critics respond that procedure matters. Courts can't relitigate the same dispute across states without the right legal basis. Either way, paperwork has been the battlefield, not a lab result. And that's why the story keeps looping. No DNA test everyone accepts, no final answer everyone trusts. There's also the image economy to consider. The Carters aren't just artists, they're a global brand. Power couples live and die by narrative control, and any paternity story, true or not, can bend public perception. That's why you'll hear claims, again, claims that powerful people tried to keep this quiet, while the other side insists they've been pushing in the open for years. The truth is, we're mostly looking at dueling interpretations of court records and a lot of sealed or technical rulings most fans will never read. Zoom out, and the emotional stakes are obvious. For a man seeking identity, a DNA test is closure. For a family guarding its privacy, it's an intrusive demand. For the public, it's a tabloid cliffhanger. But in law, feelings don't win cases. Jurisdiction, standing, timeliness, these dry words decide whether a judge can even hear the question, much less order a test. So where does that leave us today? With a story that's heavy on filings and light on finality. Claims that a court ordered a DNA sample circulate online. Hard public confirmation is much rarer. Allegations about who pushed whom behind the scenes are plentiful. Verifiable facts are scarce. What we can say, a paternity claim has persisted for years. Various courts have ruled on process more than parentage, and the only outcome that truly resolves this, an agreed, authenticated DNA result, hasn't landed in public view. Until that changes, expect the same cycle. New filings, new theories, and a familiar refrain. One side asking for a test, the other declining to litigate this in the court of public opinion. Let's map the timeline, carefully, and with the right labels, so you can see why this story keeps resurfacing without ever truly resolving. It starts with Ramir Satterthwaite's allegation. He says his late mother, Wanda, encountered Jay-Z in the early 1990s, long before the Carter marriage, and that she later told him Jay-Z was his biological father. According to Ramir, an affidavit signed by Wanda named Jay-Z. Afterward, Ramir and his legal guardian tried to pursue paternity-related relief in court. That's the emotional core, a son seeking certainty. From there, the road turns procedural. Different filings landed in different states over the years, and courts often focused on process rather than parentage, asking, is this the right court? Is this the right kind of case? Was it filed the right way at the right time? Two phrases you'll see a lot in dockets like this. Personal jurisdiction. Does the court have authority over the person being sued, i.e. enough ties to the state? Subject matter jurisdiction. Does this court have authority over this type of case at all? You can lose on either prong without any judge ever reaching the who's the father question. And that's a big reason this saga lingers. Dismissals on technical grounds don't answer the biological one. Supporters of Ramir say the system itself threw sand in the gears. Venue switches, dismissals, mistakes by lawyers, opposing counsel pushing every possible block. Critics push back that rules matter. Courts can't just hop states or rehear disputes already ruled on elsewhere, and judges won't order a DNA test unless the case posture legally warrants it. Both things can be true, a maze of rules and a person stuck in it. What about the high-profile silence? Publicly, Jay-Z hasn't confirmed the claim. In the music, he's delivered lyrical denials. Fans often point to a Billie Jean, the kid ain't mine bar, but beyond lyrics, the official stance has been no comment. And what about Beyoncé? This is where rumor tends to run wild. To keep this responsible, there's no public verifiable evidence that she directed courts, paid off anyone, or manipulated legal outcomes. Claims about private conversations, mental health, family planning, or surrogacy that aren't documented are unverified and shouldn't be stated as fact. The safer read is branding. Power couples prize privacy, and any paternity storyline, true or false, can dent a carefully managed image. That's PR logic, not proof of interference. Back to the filings. One theme across coverage is that some petitions were dismissed because a different state had the case, or because the relief sought didn't fit the posture. Another, requests for a DNA test haven't produced a publicly shared, mutually accepted result online. You'll see lines like, "A court ordered a test." In the absence of a public docket entry everyone can see or a confirmed laboratory outcome, treat that as unconfirmed. So the present tense looks like this. A long-running paternity allegation persists. Multiple legal efforts ran aground on jurisdiction and procedure. No mutually recognized DNA result is in the public record. Lyrics and interviews keep the topic alive, but courts need filings, not feelings. Emotionally, it's easy to pick a side. A man wants identity, a famous family wants privacy. Legally, it's colder. Venue, standing, timeliness, and proper relief decide whether a judge can even compel testing. Until a case clears those thresholds and both sides agree to a transparent, authenticated test, the story stays where it's been for years, loud in headlines, unresolved in law. The truth only moves from headlines to resolution when two things line up: a clean legal posture and a clean DNA test. Courts don't weigh feelings, they weigh authority. First, they ask whether they have power over the person and over this kind of case. Then they look at filings, service, and deadlines. If any of those technical rails are off, a judge can close the file before ever reaching the core question of paternity. That's why this story has lived for years in motions and venue fights. Instead of in a lab report both sides accept. The DNA stage, if it ever arrives, is its own protocol. Judges look for an accredited lab, a documented chain of custody from cheek swab to sealed kit to result, and a report no one can credibly call contaminated or swapped. The outcome is usually binary, an exclusion, or a probability high enough for the court to treat it as decisive. But none of that matters until the case actually survives the procedural gatekeeping. And that's the wall this saga keeps hitting: returns on procedural grounds before biology is addressed. If a result were to land that excludes paternity, the legal story ends there, and the public one shrinks to a brief, resolved, moving on. If it points to paternity, the modern reality, given the petitioner is now an adult, is less about old support battles and more about legal recognition and records. Either way, the human piece is the same. Identity questions finally get an answer. From the outside, repeated procedural exits can look like dodging. Inside a courtroom, they are just rules doing what rules do, controlling venue, timing, and relief so cases don't ping-pong across states or get refiled in search of a friendlier outcome. That mismatch, public expectation versus legal mechanics, is why the story keeps returning to the news cycle without a final chapter. So the responsible bottom line is unchanged. Until there's a verified, court-recognized DNA result, this remains an allegation paired with a long procedural history. Lyrics, rumors, and screenshots aren't legal evidence. The only fair ending, whichever way it falls, comes the day a properly ordered, properly run test answers the human question and closes a cultural loop. Until then, the fairest thing you can say is the only thing that's true. The claim exists, the proof, at least publicly, does not. The stakes here aren't just headlines or hashtags, they're human. On one side is a man who says he's been chasing an answer since childhood, trying to turn a family story into something verifiable he can live with. On the other side is a family that built a fortress of privacy around its name and does not litigate personal matters in public. In between sits a court system that moves on timetables and thresholds, not on suspicion or sympathy. That triangle is why this narrative keeps looping. Every time the law says not here, not like this, the public hears never, while the petitioner hears not yet. It's also worth saying out loud that delay isn't proof. High-profile defendants have 1,000 incentives to keep private matters off the record, and petitioners have 1,000 reasons to keep pressing. None of that turns rumor into evidence. The only thing that changes the temperature in the room is a test that both the court and the parties can't reasonably dispute. Until then, music remains metaphor, interviews remain performance, and off-the-record whispers remain exactly that, whispers. If their day comes when a judge signs a narrow order and a lab returns a clear result, expect the tone to shift from noise to notes. You'll hear careful language, acknowledgments without excess, and a fast pivot back to work, because that's how reputations survive impact. If that day never comes, this will stay suspended in the same gray space it's occupied for years, an allegation with paperwork behind it, but no publicly recognized proof on the books. The outcome carries its own costs. Closure for one person versus permanent ambiguity, a dent in a pristine brand versus the burden of never quite knowing. The fairest posture for anyone watching is to keep two ideas in your head at once. Privacy is not an admission, and persistence is not a verdict. Courts aren't built to validate feelings, they're built to validate records. When a record exists, it will speak in a single clinical sentence that finally says more than 1,000 think pieces ever could. Until that sentence appears, the honest line is still the simplest. The claim exists, the proof, at least publicly, does not.
Be clear, the Cowboy Carter album is a piece of shit. But for the baby to win Album of the Year for Cowboy Carter, let's talk about how wrong that is. Why? Did the Grammys feel the need to pick up her self-esteem a little bit because the Country Music Awards didn't embrace that project? Is everybody forgetting that? supposed to be a country album, and it wasn't acknowledged by any of the country community. But now that she won Grammy Album of the Year,
I don't want to embarrass this young lady, but she has more Grammys than everyone and never won Album of the Year.
The only thing the Grammys just did is prove how irrelevant a Grammy is. Because giving her a Grammy Award for that piece, and the simple fact that songs like Daughter,
Bathroom attendant, let me right in,
was on that album. Have we forgotten? Siri, I need the lyrics for Beyonce, Daughter.
Now, as the court deadline for the DNA test approaches, people are asking tough questions. Why wasn't this handled years ago? Why did it take so many legal fights and so much silence? And the bigger question, how much did Beyonce really know? According to people close to the situation, Beyonce may have had more involvement behind the scenes than most realized. And now that the court is finally stepping in, it may be harder than ever to keep those secrets hidden. Let's break it down. According to reports, Rymir and Lily alleged that both Jay-Z and Beyonce used their influence to prevent a DNA test from happening. Even more surprising, they ended up filing legal complaints against their own attorneys, claiming those lawyers were working against them instead of helping.
And so, in January of 2022, a New Jersey judge issued an order prohibiting Rymir, his mother, and his godmother from being able to file anything in the state of New Jersey without the judge first reviewing and determining that it was filed properly with proper claims and proper requests for relief. And then the judge sent this order prohibiting them from filing anything, basically across all of New Jersey, so everybody was aware that they can't do that. And from there, Rymir, his mom, and his godmother sued the courts, like literally sued New Jersey Supreme Court and judges in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey. But those lawsuits were dismissed with prejudice. Biggest claim in this new lawsuit actually has to do with New Jersey denying his mother's petition based on jurisdiction. Rymir argues that the New Jersey court denying his mother's petition based on lack of jurisdiction was incorrect because he has proof that Jay-Z lived in and owned property in New Jersey at the time the petitions were filed. But here's the thing, and I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like Rymir is partly right, but also partly wrong. So New Jersey did deny his mother's petition based on jurisdiction, but it was based on two types of jurisdiction. The first is personal jurisdiction, and that has to do with a person's ties to a state. So if Jay-Z and his attorneys were telling the judge that Jay-Z has no ties to New Jersey at all, which is apparently what they did, and that's why this case should not be handled in New Jersey, then that means Rymir has a point, because it would indicate New Jersey did in fact have the right and the authority to rule on a case involving Jay-Z. However, the second type of jurisdiction that the case was denied on is called subject matter jurisdiction, and that's the bigger problem. So subject matter jurisdiction has to do with a court's ability or authority to hear a case at all. So in this instance, Rymir's mother originally filed this case in Pennsylvania. It was determined to be under the jurisdiction of Pennsylvania. The case was then argued in Pennsylvania, and a Pennsylvania judge ruled on the case. So at this point, unless Rymir is able to show that the case should have never been in Pennsylvania to begin with, or that there's some kind of massive evidence or reason that a New Jersey court should step in and ignore what Pennsylvania ruled on, he's essentially stuck with the Pennsylvania ruling, because states aren't in the habit of just stepping in and overruling what another state has already decided. If that was the case, every time somebody lost a case, they would just refile it in a new state. So a New Jersey judge attempted to explain the subject matter jurisdiction issue to Rymir and his mother at a hearing, but Rymir's response to that was, if Jay-Z wasn't famous, he believes the situation would go differently. Specifically, Rymir told the judge that it seems like since Jay-Z is famous, he's untouchable and has the ability to get around a lot. The judge then replied to that remark by telling Rymir that she actually had no idea who Jay-Z was, and it wasn't until her law clerk told her that he was Beyonce's husband.
At this point, the story isn't really moving so much as echoing. Each new interview clip, each recycled headline, is the same note played through a different amp. If there's going to be a change in pitch, it won't arrive as a rumor dressed up as revelation. It will be something dull and undeniable. A stamped order, a scheduled appearance, a lab result acknowledged on the record. Until that exists, you're watching commentary chase commentary, while the legal question stays exactly where it has been for years, unanswered. The humane stance is to hold space for both truths and tension. It's understandable that someone would want a definitive answer about their parentage. It's also understandable that a family whose name is currency would refuse to adjudicate intimate questions in public. Neither impulse proves anything. Courts don't resolve these cases with vibes. They resolve them with paperwork. When the paperwork changes, the story changes. If it never does, then the fair, honest line remains the same as it is today. The claim exists and publicly verifiable proof does not. If you're waiting for a twist, don't look to whispers or recycled screenshots. The only plot device that matters now is paperwork. Either a judge signs something narrow and a lab returns something clear, or the story keeps looping the way it has for years, loud in culture and quiet in court. Until then, what you're seeing is a narrative suspended between a private family's right to shut the blinds and a grown man's right to ask a question that only science can answer. That tension doesn't make either side right. It just explains why the temperature never quite cools. The culture will keep trying to turn absence into evidence. It always does. But silence is strategy, not confession, and persistence is motive, not proof. There's a difference between a claim the public can repeat and a fact a court can accept. Without a record to point to, the rest is noise. Sometimes sympathetic, sometimes cynical, almost always incomplete. So the fairest ending right now is an honest non-ending. The claim exists, the proof, at least in public, does not. If that changes, it will change in the least dramatic way imaginable. A date on a docket, a swab in a lab, a line in a ruling. When that happens, the music and the rumors will finally take a backseat to a single clinical sentence that answers more than 1,000 think pieces ever could. Until that day, the responsible thing is to resist turning human biographies into fan fiction and let the record, if it's ever made, speak for itself. More receipts, more tea, less rumor. Tap like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next drop.